There comes a time for almost every enthusiast when they decide whether or not they want to become more than just an owner of a classic or investment grade car. They consciously determine that they'd prefer to be more than a driver. They want to become a collector. So let's assume you've made the same determination for yourself, and you've decided to take the plunge and start accruing vehicles in the form of a collection. How do you start? What will be the rationale you utilize to select that first vehicle? And, maybe more important still, what pitfalls do you need to avoid? We're going to speak with Alan Huffman, a collector, but better yet, someone who has already given thought to this subject and who has a few specific ideas that are probably worthy of our consideration. So Alan, what is your first rule?
Well, the first rule that I always like to abide by and that just jumps out at me is that I'm interested in collecting things that I like, that hold interest for me. And if you don't like what you're interested in, or the two don't go together. Beyond that, once there is a particular type of car, whether it's a Corvette or classic Porsches or vintage Fords or what have you, is that what I always like to do is try to get some information about the particular mark or make, and maybe I already have a significant amount of material on those particular cars or that particular make, but beyond that, because of the internet and that kind of thing, I would join the various and many internet forums that are available for any particular kind of car and see what is it that people are talking about, what's the current strength of the market, what are the strengths and weaknesses of a particular make or model, and beyond that, look to the various mark-specific clubs as well. Join the clubs. That's your best entree into getting next to those kind of vehicles that you like, and learn all you can. Start to communicate with those folks. They're a great source for buying and selling, locating services and stuff like that, and everything. That's a good way to go. And those would be some of my first ways to get into a particular make collecting.
What kind of budget do you start out with? Do you think in terms of, does everything have to be expensive, or how do you approach that part of it?
Well, like just about everything else, I mean, there's such a broad spectrum of price ranges for collector cars and so on. But one of the rules that always governs what I collect is what can I reasonably afford, and certainly where am I going to store the cars and keep them. If I invest money in a particular car, I probably want to keep it out of the weather, and if I end up with more than 2 or 3 or 4 cars, they need to be stored somewhere. They need to have a place that keeps them out of the weather, that protects my investment, and a place where I can really enjoy the car. So someplace warm and dry, and that can have good lighting and that kind of thing. Certainly those are keys.
You know, I've heard you talk before about getting cars that have good upside. What do you mean by upside in that situation?
Well, a car that would have good upside for me would be something that is going to trend in a positive direction for you. A place where you can take, for example, say $100, and maybe you know that if you bought that car right, maybe tomorrow, if you needed to, that initial investment could return 10% or some other number larger than that. And there are a lot of cars that have really exploded in the past few years. Certainly, as we go to look at things like older 356 Porsches and that kind of thing, I mean, as a younger person, when you could buy a 356 for $2,500, and now that same car, if it were to become available for sale today, that might be a $110,000 vehicle. And it's really amazing the growth that has really taken place in the classic and collectible car world. And a lot of that is because the cost to restore a car. So if I actually had to kind of go back to the initial question that Tom asked about collector cars, is that a lot of times you can try to buy the most car that you can for your money. Oftentimes you can find somebody's completed or restored project that they did, and you can buy that car for less than what they have into the car. So that's one way to look at things as well.
What about how important is resale in the overall analysis?
Well, how important is resale? There are probably two ways to look at it, and both should be considered. Resale is, can you sell the car? Can you, in fact, sell the car once you own it? And the other is that can you make a profit on it? Can you make some money, or at least turn over that particular investment and perhaps roll it into another vehicle? The first aspect of that is whether you can sell the car. If you collect wild, for example, hippie painted cars that have been heavily and extensively modified, maybe that's something that you really like and really have a passion for. You must remember that the person that may buy it, or as you go to offer it for sale, you may not find a large market for somebody that has your particular tastes in either custom paint or custom upholstery, or something that is really far outside of what is a stock presentation or representation of a particular vehicle. The stock, or most closely relating to stock, with perhaps approved modifications within that particular make or mark, those are going to be your best possibility, offer the best possibility for good return on your investment.
Great, those are great tips, Alan. We'll put those up at the site and expect to get some feedback from some of our viewers. Thanks.